All right. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. We appreciate you being here today and joining us for this really very important event. If you haven't already, we'd love to hear where you're calling in from. Please put your name and your location in the chat so we can all see where everyone's calling in from. We do expect an audience from a lot of different places today. So thank you again for joining us. First of all, happy Women's History Month to everyone. This is a wonderful month where we get to celebrate our history as women and come together and have events like this, like we're having today, and really tell the story of women and what is happening around the world with women. So happy Women's History Month to all of you. For those of you who celebrate Ramadan, happy Ramadan to you. This is a blessed month. I hope your fasts and prayers are accepted. And for those of you who I have not met, my name is Zahra Amanpour. I've been on the Women's Freedom Forum Board of Directors since 2004. It's really been my privilege. And I have the honor of moderating our panel and introducing all of you to these incredible women who will be speaking today. So for those of you who don't know already, we will be broadcasting this live on YouTube. We just went live a minute ago, so you should be able to find us on YouTube. I'm going to drop the handle in the chat so you all can find us on YouTube, or tell your, I should say you don't need to find us, but tell your people to join us. We'd love to have them join us. Let me put that in the chat. And we are also on social media today. We're not broadcasting live on social media. However, we would really love if you would share this event and any of the work that we do on social media. We are on X. I will share that handle with you for you to share with your friends and family. Please follow us. Please like what we do. The only way progress will continue is if we continue to lift the voices of women around the world, share the harsh realities of what we're all up against, and also share our reasons for hope, which we're going to talk a lot about today. So before I introduce you to this incredible panel, I'd like to just tell you a little bit more about Women's Freedom Forum and why we are here together today. Women's Freedom Forum is a research and educational NGO with a mission to raise public awareness on women's issues, to include human rights, empowerment, economic development, and gender equality. WFF holds consultative status with UN ECOSOC and is in association with the UN Department of Global Communication. Our research focuses on issues in countries where women experience strong social challenges toward their rights. Our long-term vision is to live in a world where there is equality, social justice, and respect for women's rights. WFF's publications and presentations are referenced for inclusion in international reports by the United Nations missions, universities, NGOs, and individuals. We share the issues and speak for those who cannot rightly speak for themselves. We provide platforms to share relevant information. The speakers are experts in their chosen mission. Therefore, the positions or opinions of speakers and writers may not necessarily be those of Women's Freedom Forum. However, we support the independent right of our speakers to share their experiences and express their views. Diverse approaches continue to move us all toward the ultimate goal of human rights and gender equality for women. Today's event is titled Unite to Eliminate Violence Against Women and Girls Globally, 2024. While we have made great progress over the past decades, as you all well know, there is still an enormous amount of work for all of us to do. Estimates published by the World Health Organization indicate that globally, about 1 in 3, that's 30% of women worldwide, have been subjected to either physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence in their lifetime. Every person in this event today has either experienced violence as a woman or knows a woman in their family or circle of friends that has been a victim of violence. This is not a far and removed problem. This is our problem here and now. My native country, Iran, has one of the worst track records in the world. Women are systematically subjected to daily physical and mental violence, and the regime's grip on the power is centered around subjugation of half the population. The exhibit that we showed you as you entered this event today shows just how brutal and misogynistic the practices and laws enforced, executed, and encouraged by the regime are, and the brutal price women in Iran pay for just being women. We will be showing you a video of the exhibit again as one of our panelists, Liliana Bakhtiari, who's with us today, walks you through the different pictures. So if you missed it at the beginning of the program, at the end of the program, we will be walking you through with a video of that exhibit and talking through what's included in that exhibit. So you will see it again. Today's panel will share different perspectives on violence against women globally, based on our speakers' personal experiences, family experiences, work experiences, and life experiences. Each of our speakers will share a perspective that showcases the incredible brutality that women are subjected to around the world. But they will also share the progress that is being made and their own personal reasons for hope. Progress comes in many shapes and forms, including resistance, policy change, activism, and just plain awareness. But one thing that exists in all progress and gives us hope is the courage that women show to make change happen and stand in the face of violent oppression. We see women stepping into positions of leadership and leading other women and men towards a world that no longer tolerates violence against women. I ask today that you listen for those examples of courage and leadership in our panel and ask yourself, what is my part in ending violence against women? How can I support the women around the world who are leading the way? Now, I would like to turn it over to our first panelist today and my fellow Women Freedom Forum Director, Lynn Dykstra. Let me tell you a little bit about Lynn. Lynn is a professional international event photographer and founder of our Global Cry for Freedom. Using images and stories, our Global Cry for Freedom promotes organizations that work to improve the conditions of women who face unjust discrimination in any form, with a belief that all women are fully entitled to live in a world where there is equality, social justice, and respect for equal rights. Lynn serves as the Women's Freedom Forum representative for the United Nations issues. Thank you, Lynn, for being here. Please start.
Thank you, Zara. Thanks to each of you for joining this year's UN CSW program. Wherever you are in the world, we enthusiastically welcome you to our Women's Freedom Forum presentation. I am Lynn Dykstra. I serve as the WFF representative on UN issues. And today I will share background on what brings us together and suggest personal action steps as we work toward gender equality. Achieving gender equality and women's empowerment, achieving gender equality and women's empowerment requires a coordinated approach. This includes first being aware of the atrocities and moving toward correcting the injustices. It takes the work of individuals, grassroots, and leadership organizations to concurrently move toward positive, sustainable, systemic changes in policies and attitudes. We know from the heartaches, the hopes, and the realizations we experience that reaching the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 5, gender equality by 2030, is a daunting one. The UN and UNICEF statistics indicate that gender equality goals will take hundreds of years to achieve. 300 years to end child marriage, they state. 140 years to be represented equally in positions of power. 47 years to reach equal representation in national parliament levels. Undeterred, we continue to move this agenda forward. We set our path and we do not stop. We commit to correcting wrongs and creating lasting advances in women's rights. It's a heavy, heart-wrenching intention. Just how do we keep our sanity in check? Our power to serve resides within us. It's not external. No one hands it over to us. We own it and we share it with like-minded goal setters. Others trying to steal it from us, we grab it back. Our courage is strengthened with each experience. We see injustice, and against all odds, we say, this needs to change and I will help change it. From this, we add our unique skills to the worldwide commitment for gender equality and women's rights. Our personal and collective power creates our actions, and our actions are the cornerstone to change. So many parts of our world are unbearably disconnected from women and girls' rights and gender equality. We experience our own pain or witness the pain of others worldwide through family violence, systemic misogyny, brutal attacks on women's bodies, lack of health care, food, housing, clothing, illegal imprisonment, physical and psychological torture, the denial of education or economic growth opportunities. The list is unending and overwhelming. The path can be brutal. When there are successes, and there are successes, the rewards for all involved are so worth it all. The stories from our panelists today will reinforce our understanding of real-life issues and the need to end this anguish. We see progress. One by one, women are elected to local councils where grassroots activism can be most effective. Women holding worldwide national leadership positions are gaining steadily, not fast enough, but there is an improvement each year. Women in religious communities open their doors. Protests grow, international pressure is applied. One by one, lives are saved, a policy is amended, a discriminatory law is abolished, and more women begin to benefit from the brave leadership and sacrifices of those who came before them. And as leaders, it is our responsibility to help others discover their own leadership assets so they will, in turn, help others help themselves. When groups of women are focused on expanding the advancements of our common goal, this collective energy resonates throughout the world. A few years ago, I spoke here of having a personal commitment plan to help strengthen our resolve. I want to remind us of what I believe it should include. To be truly effective with the challenges we take on to reach the goal of gender equality, we must first develop and execute a plan to meet the immediate crisis or the long-term change. Sometimes the crisis is so immediate that we must toss the plan. So have a backup plan and implement it. We focus on our immediate goal and we stay on its bumpy path. Money and resources are scarce. We pool our skills and objectives with other NGOs. We build on the strength of each other, mentally, emotionally, and physically. We raise our voices. We are truthful and straightforward with all intended goals. We're a team. We leave no one behind, not one of our co-workers, no, not one of our NGO partners, not our funders, not the women we are helping. We leave no one behind. First and last, we must remember to be kind to ourselves. We all know the phrase, it takes a village. There are many challenges and there are successes. When we all follow our unique plan to end violence against women and girls, we are solidly in step with each other worldwide. We are together as one. We must continue our genuine and remarkable work in that same light. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you for reminding us that this is an investment, a personal commitment, something that we have to put our hearts, our energies into, and recommit ourselves to over and over again. And thank you for setting the stage for today's panel. Our next speaker is Setareh Abouali. Setareh is a first-generation Iranian-American born and raised in Northern Virginia. She currently works in federal technology consulting in the Washington, D.C. area. Setareh attended the University of Virginia, where she received her BA in Foreign Affairs and Master of Public Health. During her time at UVA, she was actively involved in public health research and helped conduct 2 research projects, one of which was published. In her free time, she loves to walk her dog, dance, and cook Persian food. Thank you, Setareh, for being here today.
Thanks, Sahra, for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Setareh. Like Sahra said, I was born and raised in the US, but my parents were political refugees and they left Iran around 1984. So I do have a Master of Public Health, and I just graduated recently with it this past May. And while I was in my MPH program, I remember all of the Zan Zendegi Azadi events happening, or Women Life Freedom. And although I'm Iranian, so I've always thought about what life for a woman is like in Iran, but seeing it in the news so much in the US, which I'd never seen before, was really emotional for me. And it kind of led me to connect what I was seeing in the news back to what I was learning in my public health classes. So I would read articles about like a woman getting beaten in the street. And I started thinking about, well, if they have all these open wounds and they're injured, are they able to go to a hospital easily? And if they can go to a hospital, what kind of care are they getting? And will that help their infections? So that's what got me interested in the healthcare system. So today I'm going to be talking about gender inequities in the Iranian healthcare system. And women in Iran are, in general, more susceptible to violence because of the combination of church and state. A lot of Islamic laws there do not consider women in a positive way. For one example, female genital mutilation is still common in some communities living in Iran, and that is not considered illegal under the Islamic punishment law of Iran. And certain laws in Iran do not prohibit violence against women, and Iran does not keep official data on violence against women, even domestic violence. So it's very hard to get a sense of what it's actually like over there. And the fact that it's not being recorded by the government shows that it's not really a true concern there. So it's interesting to see how that's embedded into other systems of their government, like the healthcare system. So in developing nations worldwide, women experience greater mortality rates than men. And this is an indicator of a healthcare system that is not built for them and or doesn't consider all of their unique needs. In Iran specifically, a woman's access to healthcare is dependent on some things like their economic status, which isn't new. It's like that in the US too, but it's also blocked by sexist cultural norms that are driven by religion, like their marital status. In Iran, female heads of households have a lower health status and less access to healthcare because they don't have a man there to bring in more money or escort them to a certain doctor that they need. Something else in Iran that determines a woman's healthcare accessibility is rurality. And this also is a trend everywhere. Like in the US, rural communities have way less healthcare resources than urban communities. But in Iran specifically, since the healthcare system there is weak in a broader sense, rural areas take a huge hit. So Iran does have a national government healthcare system called the Primary Healthcare Network, or the PHC. And what this looks like for rural areas is that each rural village or groups of villages has a health house, or in Farsi, this is called behvars. And each of these health houses typically have one physician and then up to 10 healthcare workers. But these health houses can serve anywhere from 1,200 to 7,000 residents. So if you're living in a rural area, there's one doctor for 12,000 to 7,000 people. If you're a woman, imagine you're pregnant and it takes you like 3 months to get to a doctor and you have a high-risk pregnancy and that doesn't get found until 3 months in. Or even if you just need basic care for anyone, it would be so hard to get an appointment when you have the same doctor as 7,000 other people in your village. In rural areas in general, even with the private sector, there are less gynecologists and midwives available. So that makes pregnancy a very dangerous thing for a woman. In Iran, to give them some credit, there has been a 75% decrease in their maternal mortality rate. And maternal mortality is women who experience death due to pregnancy or childbirth. This statistic is a bit outdated, but it is hard to find data on Iran. But from 1990 to 2013, there was a 75% decrease in maternal mortality from 83% to 23%. But that decrease is super concentrated in the urban and developed areas who have more resources. In Sistan, Balochistan, which is a rural area in Iran, the maternal mortality rate there is around 54%. But then in Tehran, which is the city, an urban area, the maternal mortality rate is only 12%. So in that rural area, over half of women, 54% of women, are going to die because they get pregnant or because they give birth to a child. And that's all because they're in a rural area, resources don't go there. In general, Iran doesn't pay attention to women and what they need. And according to a report by Iran's Ministry of Health, more than 50% of the maternal mortality that they have today is still preventable. So they acknowledge that it is preventable. Like, for example, the reason why women die there when they're pregnant or give birth to a child is because the quality of the hospital care is low. They don't have updated technology, or there are really high wait times, so people can die in the waiting room. On-time referral of high-risk pregnant women is late. So if a woman does have high-risk pregnancy, it's not found until they're already about to die or they're already dead. And the high rates of C-sections there. C-sections are not safe to do in Iran because the quality of the care is low. So that is another reason why maternal mortality rate is high. And these are all very preventable things if they have the resources and the desire to fix it for women. So I know I just threw a lot of sad information at everyone, but Zahra mentioned, like, what are some things that give us hope? One of the things that give me hope is knowing that there are organizations there that do care about this. Like, for example, us here today, like, we're putting on this panel and I'm talking about this, but also if any of you have read Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan, the main theme in that 10-point plan is a separation of church and state. And the lack of this separation in Iran is the main reason for all this violence against women, especially the healthcare violence against women. And healthcare is such a basic need. So the fact that religion being intertwined with the government there means that women can't get the healthcare they need is just absurd. But Maryam Rajavi's 10-point plan does address this. And she also calls for complete gender equality, which will affect healthcare in Iran too. So knowing that there are groups there that do consider this and don't want that to be Iran's future and current state does make me feel better. But I hope that this information enlightened the state of Iranian's healthcare system for women, for you all, and makes you as passionate about healthcare as I am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Setara. Thank you for that perspective. You know, we often, when we think about violence against women, the first place our minds go is not necessarily healthcare. We just think of that as like a lack of resources. But there is no doubt that this is one systematic way that women's bodies are brutalized through violence, is through the lack of healthcare, the lack of access to healthcare, and the lack of proper resources when it comes to healthcare. So thank you for that talk. It's very eye-opening. Thank you. All right, I want to remind everyone that the positions of our opinions of speakers and writers may not necessarily be those of Women's Freedom Forum. However, we support the independent right of our speakers to share their experiences and express their views. So we are here, we are an educational institution, but we are here to share different perspectives and shed light on what is happening around the world and the different perspectives that are behind the good work that is happening around. Our next speaker is Antonia Felix. Antonia and I have worked together for some time now. She has taught me so much in her work, in her speeches, and I'm very grateful to have her here today. Antonia is a New York Times best-selling author of 25 books, including biographies of women leaders such as Elizabeth Warren, Sonia Sotomayor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Condoleezza Rice. She is a professor of the Department of Educational Leadership at Minnesota State University, Mankato, where her research focuses on racial and gender equity in public education. Antonia, thank you again for being here today. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Sarah. As Setara so eloquently described for us about an entire healthcare system not really working for women and not really designed for women in Iran and globally, what I'm going to talk about today is another system, the criminal justice system, I should say, that here in the United States has not worked for or been designed for Native American women. In my home state of Minnesota, a northern city on Lake Superior called Duluth is the largest inland harbor in the world. Ships from the Atlantic Ocean sail along the St. Lawrence Seaway to this port that traces its origins to the mid-1600s when French fur traders started coming through. The region had long been home to the Ojibwe people, who still live near the city on a reservation called Fond du Lac. As Europeans settled in the area as part of the Western expansion that would eliminate all but a small fraction of the Native American population for a time, Duluth, like everywhere else, became a particularly dangerous place for Native American women. The history of expansion since first European contact in the 15th century is the story of abduction, slavery, sexual exploitation, and murder of Native American women. And the story continues today. In our time, about 1,000 ships a year dock at the Duluth Harbor, and studies report that in some of them, Native women and children are sex trafficked to ships' crews and disappear for months before returning. A study by the Minnesota Office of Justice Programs gathered reports of Native girls being, quote, lured off reservations, taken onto ships in port, beaten and gang raped by the ship's crews, unquote. An advocate for sex-trafficked Native women said, "This has been going on 100 years on ships. There's women my mom's age who talk about their grandmas working on these ships." To understand the violence against Native American and Alaska Native women that marks more than 500 years of our nation's history is to understand the mindset that considers non-white people inferior to whites to the point of being barely human. As one writer put it, in order to seize land that belongs to someone else, colonizers must come to view the land and its inhabitants as inherently violable. To this end, American Indian land and American Indian bodies are both represented as untamed and therefore available for seizure and use by white colonizers. Filmmaker Michelle Latimer, who produced a film about violence against Native women during the North Dakota oil boom that started in 2006, has said the same. This idea that's perpetuated that we have a right over this land is the exact kind of entitlement that perpetuates the idea that we have a right over your body, she said. The sexual assault and missing and murder rate of Native American women is one of the most severe, if not most critical areas of violence against women in the United States. The rate of sexual assault for these women is the highest per capita in the nation. More than 1 in 3 Native American women will be raped in their lifetime, twice the rate of rapes reported by all races combined. 3/4 of Native American women have experienced some type of sexual assault in their lives. Sexual assault is so prevalent for Native women, whether they live on or off reservations, that Native American mothers have a talk with their daughters, similar to how Black parents in the US have the talk with their sons about how to act if they are stopped by the police. Native American mothers talk to their daughters about what to do when they are sexually assaulted, not if they are sexually assaulted, but when. That talk typically covers how to access emergency contraceptives, for example. The majority of the perpetrators of these crimes, 96%, are non-Native men. As one woman from the White Earth Nation in Minnesota stated, before the Violence Against Women Act was expanded to prosecute non-Natives, she said, "I call it hunting. Non-Natives come here hunting. They know they can come onto our lands and rape us with impunity because they know that we can't touch them." Part of the problem in prosecuting sexual assault on tribal lands is the complex tangle of who has jurisdiction over what. Federal law prohibited tribal authorities from prosecuting non-Natives for any crimes until the 2013 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. That was a big step, but the crimes the tribes could prosecute were limited to domestic violence or dating violence, and non-Natives living outside tribal land still could not be prosecuted. Not until the landmark reauthorization of the law 2 years ago did tribal nations have the authority to prosecute non-Native perpetrators of sexual assault, child abuse, stalking, and sex trafficking. The 2022 version also provides critical funding for programs to assist Native American women victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So things are moving in the right direction. The crisis of violence, though, includes the fact that Native women make up only 1% of the population, but are murdered at 10 times the rate of the national average. Murder is the third leading cause of death for Native women. In early 2023, 5,491 Native American women were recorded as missing by the FBI's National Crime Information Center. This crisis has motivated a justice system historically disinterested in the safety of Native American women to ramp up efforts to investigate, solve, and prevent more of these cases. These numbers are important, but the message I really want to convey is that the same attitudes that caused so much devastation for Native American and Alaska Native women at the start of European expansion remain intact today. They are the foundation of, as we heard, healthcare inequities, housing policies, wealth inequities, lack of protective resources, massive sterilization without consent, and poverty that are responsible for the vulnerabilities that make Native women highly susceptible to violent crimes. These attitudes are heard when a Native woman testifies at a public proposed pipeline meeting, for example, about the heightened risk of sex trafficking of Native people that this pipeline will bring, and oil companies, while she's talking, oil company managers sitting in the back of the room laugh out loud. These attitudes are heard in conversations among oil workers like those during the Bakken fracking boom who said, "In North Dakota, you can take whatever pretty little Indian girl that you like and you can do whatever you want and police don't give a F about it." The impact of these century-old attitudes and the violence they perpetuate is held literally under the skin of Native American women and children. Their historical trauma, intergenerational trauma, is passed on in the genes and creates generational health problems. This same epigenetic process can remedy that generational trauma when healing comes through programs that reinforce one's Native identity and human worth. Enormous gains for Native lives, like legal victories at the Supreme Court and recently signed new laws like Savannah's Act and the Not Invisible Act, and movements that renew cultural pride, offer a hint that violence against Native women can also be turned around. More hope comes from Native American groups that are working to launch new policies to stop the wave of missing Native American women. This Thursday, for example, March 14th, The Federal Communications Commission will discuss Native public media's proposal for a national alert system for missing Native women and men, similar to the Amber Alert we have for missing children. At the state level, North and South Dakota already have this alert in place with a system called the Red Road Alert. So what can we do to be part of these solutions? I suggest that we can be allies by giving financial support to the organizations that are investigating missing and murdered Native women and that work with Native women who are victims of violence, and organizations that simply raise awareness about this crisis. I have links to several of those on the document containing these remarks. You can find the document on my website at antoniafelix.com. We can also educate ourselves on the signs of trafficking and have that National Human Trafficking Hotline somewhere we can access it so that when we suspect it, we can do something about it. And finally, at every chance, we can try to bust the myth that Native Americans have disappeared from their continent. Their 13 million population was reduced to 240,000 by 1900, but according to the 2023 census, they are well on their way back at 6.3 million. So a final word to my fellow white Americans: have the courage to confront the racial bias that society and all its institutions have conditioned in you. This is the only path toward equity, the healing of the oppressed, and a real democracy. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Antonia. As I said, I always learn from you. And it's so important for us in the United States. We like to think of these issues as distant, not happening around us, not relevant to our lives. But those of us who live with that privilege here in the United States, we need to know that it is right here, and it's happening to our fellow women right here in the United States, to the Native women of this land. So thank you for bringing that perspective. Really appreciate it. Our next speaker is Sara Hassani. Sara is an assistant professor of political science and women's and gender studies at Providence College. Her research concerns feminist, intersectional, and critical theories of gender, agency, state, policing, resistance, and protest, with a particular focus on the relationships between gender, self-destructive, and political forms of violence. Her work has been published in peer-reviewed journals, including Central Asian Survey and International Feminist Journal of Politics, as well as appeared at outlets like the Huffington Post. Sara, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Zahra, and thank you so much to the Women's Freedom Forum for hosting this really important exchange and conversation about ending violence against women and girls globally. I think we're all very motivated based on the previous speeches to really learn more and take on more as it relates to this issue. I myself am a researcher who, for the past decade, my work has grown out of personal experiences. Shortly after I lost loved ones to self-destructive violence and self-immolation in particular, it was actually a conversation with my grandmother in Tehran that brought my attention to the elevated and disproportionate rates of self-destructive violence and self-immolation in particular among young and impoverished women and girls across the country, this country being Iran. Now, being a researcher, I had to know more about the topic, and so I dug into the literature. The more I found on this issue, the more prevalent self-immolations became across the region, across Afghanistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, and so my research grew. To give you a sense of the figures, my research has found that between 1994 and 2013 alone, the Islamic Republic of Iran has seen a minimum of 6,792 self-immolation attempts, 74% of which were undertaken by young women and girls, usually in their reproductive years of age. I similarly found that between 2008 and 2018, upwards of 1,000 cases of self-immolation were treated at Herat Regional Hospital in Afghanistan, upwards of 90% of which involved young women and girls. At their height, Tajikistan saw an average of 360 self-immolations by women and girls annually, and today witnesses somewhere in the range of 20 to 30 cases a year. Uzbekistan similarly sees approximately 2 cases of self-immolation occurring weekly, according to the most recent figures provided by burn doctors at hospitals. Now, following travel to Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, where I conducted research and interviews with survivors and civil society, as well as several years of remote interviews with Iranian and Afghan communities, my research has led to the following findings. First and foremost, nearly all, that is 95% of the 40 survivors of self-immolation whom I interviewed had undertaken to take their own lives following significant trials with coercive and controlling relationships where domestic violence was significantly affecting all aspects of their lives. What's more interesting is that this wasn't your typical or stereotypical, rather, story of abusive husbands, though it sometimes was the case. Rather, these were instances involving abusive families, in-laws, extended live-in families, and even often abusive communities and political authorities. In other words, there were societal and even political dimensions to the abuse that these women and girls were suffering. Many explained trying to run away after being denied a divorce by the local authorities, only to be found and forced back into their homes by the wider community. Furthermore, these women's and girls' actions were not often seeking death or suicide as such. Rather, they were seeking a way out, a way to stop the violence, and often to signal rather publicly their unwillingness to bear this indignity any longer. The most pressing and common issues that I found precipitated their turns to self-destructive violence included the following: forced and early marriages, the denial of the right to attend school, the denial of the right to enter the workforce and earn a wage, the denial of obtaining a divorce or child custody, and being submitted to a polygynous marriage against their will. Some women even described using the act both to put an end to and publicize the extreme levels of violence that they had been subjected to on a daily basis. In other words, their turns to self-destructive violence were protesting the indignities of gender-based violence that had become routine, as well as age-based violence, as we must remember that these are young women and girls who often find themselves at the very bottom of familial and even communal hierarchies. Now, being a political scientist, I also can't ignore that gender violence does not occur in the vacuum of families and even communities, especially across a region as vast as this one. In the cases of Iran and Afghanistan, the existence of formal gender apartheid at the level of the laws, whether constitutional, familial, penal, or civil, is rather glaring and I don't think needs much elaboration. Women are discriminated against in matters of divorce, whereas men are not. There are no domestic violence laws on the books, and women's lives may be taken in the name of defending honor and chastity by their male relatives, who in many cases hold impunity, full legal impunity. They may also be precluded from travel or work by their husbands or male guardians. What is perhaps most surprising, however, is that in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, where civil laws do provide formal and equal protections for women and men, especially in these areas, this is a legacy of the Soviet Union, there also exists parallel worlds, that is, separate public and private spheres, such that women who are married, especially in the rural areas, in traditional marriages or nikah, those marriages are officiated without civil registration often, and it enables virtually the same set of rules that I described in the case of Iran and Afghanistan, apart from impunity in cases of murder. And so there exists a de facto system of apartheid in all of these countries and a de jure system of apartheid in Iran and Afghanistan that enables women and girls to be married as first, second, third, and even fourth wives in marriages that, in the case of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, are not registered with the state's authorities and where customary laws govern the state of a woman and girl's exit options from abusive circumstances. Now, I understand these formal and de facto forms of gender apartheid to be legacies of 20th century state formation, as well as modernization policies that excluded women's participation. We also see a dynamic of competing imperialisms and domestic political forces that have disproportionately politicized women's and girls' bodies and have positioned them, as in the case of Iran's 1979 constitution, as signifiers of sovereignty. Finally, despite the advertisements of all 4 countries, I also found through extensive interviews with civil society that few to no exit options exist for young women and girls who are seeking to flee these really abusive realities. In Tajikistan, I visited the largest women's shelter in the country, which hosts a capacity of 6 to 9 beds and is independently run by the community. In Uzbekistan, I've also visited the largest independently run shelter for women, which is organized by compassionate members of one mahalla, and it hosts a maximum of 18 beds at any time. Government-run shelters in all 4 countries, I was repeatedly told by women who had sought shelter there, are not safe or reliable, and they often put women in more danger as their locations are known to the public and so invite routine harassment. Today, we can look to these cases of privately run shelters by various communities as efforts that we should be supporting at an international level. Funding agencies in the United Nations, as well as across the globe, should really be looking to partner with those civil society communities who are really putting their efforts into forging sanctuaries for young women and girls. Now, many of these people who staff these centers are volunteers and are desperate for funds to keep their doors open and supply overhead costs. I will, in a moment, share in the chat a link to one Tajik women's rehabilitation center that you might choose to support. This is an arena that we can work on and unite together to bring about sort of a lasting change. Second, based on my research, I want to invite us all to think more closely about the relationship between political violence, the political violence of gender apartheid in particular, violence against women, and even self-destructive violence, 3 related areas that we do not usually think alongside one another. To do so, I realize it is necessary that we rethink stubborn assumptions about self-destructive violence and suicidality. However, I think in doing so, we might find, as I have in my own research, that the crimes of gender apartheid and gender-based violence actually take more lives than we currently take into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for connecting those dots for all of us. So often, self-destructive violence is not considered in this category, but it is. And as with everything that we're talking about today, we have to consider the conditions that are around our sisters around the world. What is happening that is bringing them to that place? What is happening what are the conditions that they're being subjected to, that this is their act of resistance. This is their act to show the world what is happening to them. Thank you so much, Sarah. With that, we are going to take a short break from the panel, and I'm going to be showing a video of a song called The Oath. This song was performed by students and faculty at the Arts of Tehran University during the nationwide uprising of the Iranian people in 2022. This is an example of hope and resistance for all of us. Thank you for watching that with me. So I want to remind everyone again, the positions or opinions of speakers and writers may not necessarily be those of Women's Freedom Forum. However, we support the independent right of our speakers to share their experiences and express their views. We are an educational institution, and we are here to show what is happening and all perspectives of that. Our next speaker is Nikki Aria. Nikki is a first-generation Mexican and Iranian born and raised in Houston, Texas. Recently, at 18 years old, Nikki moved to San Luis Potosi, Mexico, to continue her education at the University of Cuauhtémoc, where she will be entering into the dental program this fall. She aspires to open up her own practice along with free clinics in her career and be a mentor to future dental students. Her immigrant parents are her inspiration for her desire to make a change in the world with not just her voice, but also her actions. Growing up attending protests for human and women rights all her life, she desires to continue being part of the fight for equality. Welcome, Nikki. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, buenos dias. Thank
Buenos
you,
dias.
Zara, and thank you to everyone who has taken time out of their day to come and listen to these wonderful women speak. I'd like to start off by saying that we convene today not merely as individuals, but as defenders of justice and allies united in the pivotal battle against crimes targeting women. Globally, women grapple with the harsh reality of violence, discrimination, and oppression, both within their homes and the streets they navigate. In Mexico, a nation steeped in cultural richness and historical significance, a pressing concern jeopardizes the safety and well-being of its female population, crimes against women. Ranging from discrimination to femicide to sexual violence, women in Mexico face an array of threats that erode their rights and dignity. Official figures as recent as 2023 paint a bleak picture revealing an alarming average of 12 women murdered daily in Mexico, with many of those cases left unresolved. Beyond femicide, women endure widespread sexual violence, harassment, and domestic abuse daily. Every act of violence against a woman unravels the fabric of our society, perpetuating a cycle of fear and silence. The pervasive culture of machismo in Mexico has profoundly impacted the lives of many women. My mentor, a resident of Mexico, has shared with me stories of personal abuse from her father and discouragement from pursuing higher education from both her parents and professors. Today, Tales abound of girls fleeing unsafe homes where their fathers subject them to violence and sexual assault. Decades of normalized degradation persist not only within households but also in educational institutions. Professors then and now perpetrate harmful stereotypes, hindering the academic pursuits of women. Reflecting on my own high school experiences, on my own high school years in the United States, inappropriate sexist and sexual comments from educators and peers created an atmosphere of fear and discrimination. I often received discouraging remarks about my capabilities from my male teachers and coaches, many of whom were role models for young boys. This normalized behavior spread to my male peers, leaving girls hesitant to speak out for fear of dismissal in this toxic environment. These issues rooted themselves in deep-seated inequalities, systematic failures, and cultural norms. Many sources say socioeconomic factors such as poverty and limited access to education exacerbates women's vulnerability to violence and exploitation. While this is true, my sister, a medical student, has told me it is not about a lack of education, but a low regard for females in general, as she has told me her personal stories of her own professors, medical professionals, and respected figures in the field who have often tried to abuse their power and taken advantage of the vulnerability of female students. By challenging traditional gender roles and stereotypes, education of this issue becomes a potent tool to dismantle structures perpetrating violence against women. It paves the way for a more inclusive and equitable society. Educating the people serves as a transformative force in combating gender-based violence by challenging traditional gender roles and stereotypes. It fosters critical thinking, encourages open dialogue, and promotes a nuanced understanding of gender dynamics, creating an environment where individuals question and challenge societal norms. In essence, education shapes both minds and society, contributing to a brighter, more equitable future. Despite these challenges, we reject despair. Change is not only possible, but imperative. Our moral duty, ethical obligation, and fundamental responsibility demand that we stand up, speak out, and take action. Beyond punitive measures, addressing the root causes of violence against women is crucial. Tackling inequality, fostering respect, and creating safe spaces are essential steps toward constructing a society free from fear. Halting crimes against women transcends gender boundaries. It signifies our commitment to justice, belief in equality, and vision of a better world for all. Together, let us act with urgency and determination to bring about the change we desperately need. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. And thank you for bringing that perspective, our perspective, back to the Western Hemisphere, where again, we often don't acknowledge the things that are happening right around us and the connection here between the United States and Mexico, and how this is a systematic and cultural issue that we have to face together. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Jamile Zamoni. Jamile is a financial technology professional and avid adventurer, proudly holding dual citizenship in Canada and the US, arriving in Canada as a refugee and later immigrating to the US through an H-1B visa. She has dedicated her career to cybersecurity and advancing chip and PIN technology within the financial technology sector. Originally from Iran, Jamila's journey began at the age of 3, and today she calls the picturesque landscapes of Washington State her home. When she's not securing the fintech industry, you can find her conquering mountain trails or carving through fresh powder on her skis. Thank you, Jamila, for being here today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Zara. It's such an honor to speak with you all today. It gives me so much hope just to see how many women are using their privilege and voices to engage in ongoing dialogue to sustain change for those women who are not able to today. Today, I want to talk to you about trauma and how it lasts in our souls and our DNA for generations. Violence against one woman will be passed on to her kin for an unknown number of generations. It is everlasting and stays in our hearts and souls. I want to take you on a journey today. I want to be my mother's voice and describe her time in jail as a political prisoner in the infamous Evin jail in Iran. I would love for my mom to have been able to tell her story herself, but to this day, her voice still quivers. Her tears are still shed and her throat still closes, recalling this difficult time. Today, I will be her voice and I will heal her trauma for both of us with one speech at a time. At the age of 29, my mom's house was raided where she lived with her brothers. The Islamic Republic Revolutionary Guards broke down the door of her childhood home in the middle of the night, looking for her brothers who were identified as resistance to the Islamic Republic. Their address was targeted and they had entered the house with automatic assault rifles. The Islamic Republic consistently practices psychological warfare whenever possible, and these tactics are evident as they raided each room methodically, shooting through things like photos, fridges, and pipes. Finally, after a destructive and intrusive search, they found some ink that had been used on resistance pamphlets dispersed under a bed. Seeing as how my mother's brothers were not home, the guards took her in their place. They knew that using a woman and dangling her as bait would be the best way to draw out her brother. After all, who more vulnerable than an unmarried virgin woman sitting in jail? Nothing has changed from that time when my mother was first thrown in jail. Today, in 2023, similarly, 44,000 guards, including intelligence agents, IRGC guards, Basij militants, and plainclothes agents, and state security forces in Tehran alone stifled protests. The day my mother was arrested, she was dragged away by her hair in a dark bus, blindfolded and emptied into a cell. As my mother was to the notorious prison, my grandmother screamed out, "Her husband will be there to get her out." At that time, my mother was a single woman and was very perplexed as to why her mother would say such a thing. Even to this day, my mom finds it difficult telling me the stories of the time she spent in prison. She fears that telling me these details, she will in turn pass her lived trauma on to me. So she sits with it. She holds it close to her and hopes that it will eat away at only her, and that's one less woman that they will have hurt. During her time in prison, my mom was on heart medication, as she has an artificial valve in her heart. She begged the guards to please let her gather her medication before they took her, and the guards declined. Once in jail, she begged them again to please allow her to have her medication delivered to her, and once again was declined. My grandmother brought my mother's medication to the jail, but the guards again took the medication, threw it on the ground on the other side of the wall in front of my grandmother. You see, the guards' goal is to break the spirit of as many women as possible, no matter the situation or method. To teach these women that their place is beneath the blood-soaked boot of the Islamic Republic of Iran is their ultimate goal. I now will just share a distinct interaction that my mom has reluctantly shared with me in order to paint a picture of the type of violence against women that the Islamic Republic practices. These are her words. During one day while in prison, I was waiting for hours to use the washroom in fear of interacting with guards. When I could no longer stand the pain, I finally called out to one of the male guards who was in charge of watching over the women's ward. I opened my mouth and said with a quivering voice, "I have to use the toilet." They said they would guide me to the bathroom using a pencil because women were so disgusting, the guards did not want to even touch us. For a moment, I felt relieved that they did not want to touch us, thinking at least rape would not be something to fear. As I was blindfolded, it was almost as if an escape had come upon me. The darkness had felt better than the darkness of the cell. I jumped as a guard yelled at me, "Grab the pencil." As I reached for it, I was stabbed in the palm of my hand. I screamed and told the guard, "Please be careful. I'm a hemophiliac and my blood does not clot properly." I hadn't had my medication to regulate my blood for days. As I finished the sentence, I felt the tip of the pencil pierce the vein on the top of my other hand. I held the pencil tight the third time it came to me to make sure that I wasn't stabbed again. I covered the top of my other hand to apply pressure so that I would not bleed out. All I could think of to myself was, I hope they're not encouraged to make me bleed in other ways. It was at this moment when my mother's comment about me being married made sense to me. If they did not think that I was a virgin, they would have no interest in raping me. If they did rape me, a married, non-virgin woman, then the guards would not go to heaven. I believed we circled for a while when I finally got to the bathroom. The floor was covered in blood, my hand dripping, adding one more blood into the puddle of existing red. I couldn't tell if this blood was from a woman's natural bleed, rape, or women's injuries. By the time we had reached the bathroom, I was so terrified that I had already released my urine. I no longer had to use the bathroom. The guard stood there and watched me empty my bladder while standing there. As he watched, I asked to be blindfolded again, to be put back in my cell. On the 7th day in jail, I felt my heart flutter and asked, "Please, can I see any doctor?" Someone came and confirmed that my blood was clotting due to my lack of medication. I was immediately scheduled for release. The guards confirmed that my brother had handed himself in my place, and to this day, I am not sure why I was released. Was it to die, or was it to be successfully used as bait? My mother was jailed for a grand total of 7 days. What I have shared today is just one interaction that she has described to me. I assume that this is the least gruesome of her experiences. As the regime so consistently does, they released my mom once the blood had clotted in her heart so that if she were to die, they could claim it was of natural causes, the same as how they claimed Mahsa Amini died of a heart attack. My uncle knew the consequences of 1 week without her medication and had handed himself within hours of her release. My uncle served the remaining 7 years of jail time and was finally released with a forced opium addiction, which he overcame before the end of his life. In just the month of May 2023, 376 women three women prisoners have been executed in Iran in just 1 month. My mom, now at 74, has had a stroke 5 years ago. She has a caregiver that comes to help her with tasks, and to this day, she cannot go to the bathroom with a stranger. I still see my mom pause before taking a pencil or scissors that are handed to her. She needs help showering, but panics when a caregiver other than myself and my father help her. My mom has daily panics if she does not witness medication being packed before she leaves the house, and she likes to sleep in small closed spaces in the bedroom because it makes her feel safer. I cannot heal her trauma. I am not immune to the generational trauma the Islamic Republic of Iran has caused, but I will not let them traumatize me or my kin. I will forever be grateful to my mother for saving my life and leaving the Islamic Republic of Iran. You see, this trauma is generational, but I'm still here. I'm still speaking up, and I promise to heal for both of us and to be that change. Thank you so much for listening to this today.
Thank you so much, Jamile. You were your mother's voice today, and we heard it, and you have lifted it, and we are grateful for that. And you have lifted all women because of that. What a powerful story. Thank you. Our last speaker today is Liliana Bakhtiari. Liliana is a first-generation Iranian Azeri American born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. They are serving their first term as a member of the Atlanta City Council representing the citizens of District 5. Professionally, Liliana has worked in affordable housing, women's and children's health, and environmental justice across 26 countries around the world. Since returning to the U.S., Liliana has served as the Public Affairs Manager of Planned Parenthood Southeast, lobbied for voting rights with Pro-Georgia, served as a consultant for the Eco Market Research as they built out their social justice division, and collaborated with Partners for Home to establish a hotel program housing our at-risk unsheltered population during the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2021, they were elected to serve on the Atlanta City Council. In their tenure on City Council, they have authored legislation providing access to legal counsel for individuals facing eviction, decriminalizing abortion in the wake of Dobbs' decision, and expanding housing voucher requirements for city-funded projects. Awards include 2021 Person of the Year from the Georgia Voice, 2022 Next Generation Leader of the Year Award from Out Georgia, and the 2023 David Bonet Fellowship, which afforded them the opportunity to attend the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. Liliana is the first queer Muslim person to be elected in the state of Georgia and the first non-binary person elected in the city of Atlanta. Liliana, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. Hard to follow such an incredible group of women, but honored to have the opportunity. And, jumping into this, I wanted to first talk about a question that I get asked a lot as an elected official, and I'm certain that many of you have heard it. And it's when people ask me, when did you get into politics, or when did you become political? And my response to that always is, I was born political. Some of us do not have a choice. Some of us, breathing is a form of protest. Listening to Dr. Antonia, listening to other folks, the women that Dr. Antonia speaks about, they're born political. The world that they are born into, they do not have a choice. And I think for many of us, we didn't have a choice in the lives that we entered into, the political fray that we entered into because of what our families have gone through, because of that generational trauma. And a lot of people ask me how I got into the work. My grandfather was a Mossadegh loyalist, was tortured for 30 years on and off by the Shah secret police. My great-grandparents escaped Azerbaijan when it was USSR occupied by Lenin, and they were given 24 hours to vacate the country. And then my father fought against the Ayatollah. And my family and my dad, I was raised in a very political household, and my father grew up as a poor rural farmer just outside of Tabriz and escaped here in 81 and became a big believer in paying it forward. And as somebody who was Muslim practicing those pillars of Islam, my father started having me volunteer in shelters at the age of 5. I started marching with my dad at Mujahideen marches in support of Maryam Rajavi by the time I was 8 years old. I have been lucky enough to organize all over the country and all over the world. And I got into that work because of who my father is, because of who my family is, and because of my roots in Iran, and because of what I grew up seeing and hearing, going to Quran school, learning about the families that were tortured for speaking out against the regime, busloads of children that were taken and kidnapped and used and had bombs strapped to them or sent into enemy lines, or entire groups of people that were just sent into battle with just quotes out of the Quran with nothing as sacrificial lambs, because the government just doesn't care about the lives of the people who make Iran so great. And when I turned 18, I started organizing all over that's when I started traveling internationally, and I started doing a lot of work in women and children's rights. And I didn't enter into that work intentionally. It was a common theme that when I traveled, I saw the degradation and the mistreatment of women and girls. In Kenya, I worked with tribes that practiced female genital mutilation because they were conditioned from a young age that women were taught that if they did not have female circumcision, that they would die. There were so many women that I spoke to that said they wanted to leave that tribe and all they wanted to do was become educated and get a job. I talked to so many girls in that tribe that said rape was a concept that didn't exist and that men could come and take them at any time. And if they became pregnant, they weren't required to be married and they were kicked out of school and never allowed to be educated again. working in Cambodia and in Thailand and Laos and Vietnam, a lot of the work I did centered around educating young kids, especially young girls, on how not to get trafficked. And I'm talking as young as 4, 5, 6 years old, because the poverty was so extreme that they would go out and do simple things like trying to sell eggs or picking up plastic to make extra money. And they would be approached and offered a job. And because their family was experiencing so much poverty, their parents would allow them to go and meet for that job, which ended up being a warehouse, and they were never seen again because they were taken and put into the trafficking industry. I worked with so many women that had escaped human trafficking in Cambodia, but were forced to do things like sell their virginity or sell sexual favors in order to afford health care, because it was not provided in Cambodia for the people who lived there unless they were wealthy. In Vietnam, I worked with so many kids that were abandoned, that were orphans, because they were children of rape. In Burma, I worked with a lot of refugees where there was these women living in these tents, and the most that could be done to prevent the humiliation of being raped was to give them sewing kits, because at night men would take a knife, enter in the back of their tent, rape them, and then end up leaving. And the only way we could help them hide their shame was by handing out sewing kits so that they could sew up that hole so that people wouldn't know. It was all of that in my own experience with sexual assault, where I was assaulted numerous times throughout college, because I was living out of my car or on sofas and in stable housing and stable living situations, that really put me into the work of working with women and children. That is the foundation. That is the cornerstone of every bit of work I have done, because never, ever, ever have I traveled anywhere in the world or anywhere in our own, in the United States, where I did not see that the health, safety, and success of a community was not directly correlated in the treatment of women and children, especially young girls. Never have I gone anywhere in the world where that was not the case. An entire community suffered if women suffered. If women were mistreated, if everyone experiences it. Women are the cornerstone of everything that makes our world successful. And the mistreatment of them, mistreatment of us, has a ripple effect that we talk about, but never in its totality. And I know that we've heard a lot of these stories, and it's very easy to feel hopeless, to not feel like we can make a difference. Nothing is further from the truth. We have heard countless stories about what women have survived. And I say survived, not victims of, I say survivors, because women are resilient and our communities are resilient. And the best thing that we can do is empower young girls, because I grew up hearing that I was going to be nothing, that I was nothing, by those same teachers. A lot of what Nikki and others said really resonated with me, because my teachers witnessed me getting harassed, assaulted, and all of these things, and they did nothing. And so it instilled in me that I was worth nothing. We want to see young girls grow up to not become victims of sexual assault and violence. We need to empower them from a very young age. We need to tell young girls what they are worth. We need to tell them and set them up for success. And we certainly need to tell young boys that they are not the center of the universe. And we need to educate them on how to be supporters of women and the matriarchy, and how to make sure not to inflict harm upon women the same way that they have seen for generations and cycles before them. We want to see success in our world and an end to violence against young girls and women. We invest in education and family planning, and we want to prevent violence down the line, give women access to bodily autonomy, because women are the experts on their own condition and the families that they can raise. Because everywhere I went, I saw young boys becoming criminals by the time they were 18, because they were products of neglect, they were products of abuse, they were products of poverty. They were not set up to succeed. We set them up to end up in the school to prison pipeline. We stop that by choosing to educate ourselves, by not remaining ignorant, because ignorance is a complete privilege and it's a choice. When you hear that, oh, that's just so depressing, I can't do it. No, you educate yourself. You find out how to be a tool that can help others. You find out how to pay it forward. And to the men that are listening, please use your privilege to empower the women in your lives. It does not have to be about you. Please set up the women in your life to succeed. Please set them up to know their independence, and listen to them. My God, listen to women. take the time to do that, because I was taught at a young age that I was not to share my trauma, that it was in our conservative cultures and our conservative communities that we're not to talk about it. That is damaging. That is wrong. We break the cycles of trauma by owning them, by talking about them, by sharing them. And we have the opportunity here in the age of technology to connect all of these communities that exist in silos, but undergo the same challenges every single day. So I say all that to say we have the tools that we need to be successful, educate ourselves, pay it forward to others, invest in local groups, continue to listen to women like these, because it will turn things around. And I fully believe that women will be the reason that the regime is overthrown in Iran and in other places around the world. And women in leadership will benefit everyone. And that is what my life's work will forever continue being about. And again, I'm honored to be here today and to be part of forums like these. And I thank you all for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Liliana. Your story, your personal experience reminds us all that our experiences are connected, no matter where we go in the world, that this is a struggle for all of humanity and not just one of us or a group of us or just women. It's for all of us to take on this struggle. Thank you. And as Maya Angelou said, the truth is, no one of us can be free until everybody is free. And that's how this works. And that's why we hold these events and share our perspectives, so that there is an understanding of what is happening in the world and we can take action. So before I show all of you a video of Liliana, the speaker who just spoke, walking us through our photo exhibit, I want to just take a moment to thank all of our panelists today. Your courage to share your experiences, some of them very personal, some of them from your families, some of them from your work, bring us all one step closer to a world without violence against women. As we look forward, I ask all of you who have joined us today once again to take the stories that were shared and examples of courage and leadership, like Mariam Rajavi, for guidance and unity. Become politically active and change policy like the Native American community Antonio spoke about. Women must have full political participation and political leadership. As Liliana said, those of us who have these experiences, we were born political. And the only way to change what is in front of us, what is happening to women, to end violence against women, is if we own that role, if we own that identity and step into it and take action in this world and make this the world that we all deserve and all of the women of this world deserve. So I'm going to now show a video of Liliana. This was an event that took place in the U.S. House of Representatives on November 30th. It was also an event focused on violence against women and girls. And the exhibit that we showed at the beginning of today's program was in these beautiful large posters that they had put in the foyer in the Congress, and it was really powerful. So this is Liliana walking us through that exhibit. Oh, that's the wrong one, excuse me.
protected the protesters. We took care of them.
I was just told that there's no sound. Is that correct? Is no one hearing? I'm getting lots of text telling me
I can hear it now. Thank you, Zara.
their sound is coming through now. Was the video sound coming through? Yes?
We could hear Liliana start to talk, but not the.
Oh,
No.
okay. I'm not sure what happened there, so I will fast forward then and we'll start somewhere around there. Hopefully it will all work out.
Protected protesters. We took care of them. And was brutalized. And her family was told the next day that she died in a car crash, which we know is not true. You look at the damage that they've done to these women, how they've taken out their eyes and eaten them. As young as 6, sometimes younger. This woman, Dr. Zada, her story is incredible. She was considered a prodigy in physics. And they said 2 days before she was found dead in her university, beaten to death. None of the cameras captured anything because the university wouldn't hand them over, and they said it was suicide. 2 days before that happened, she confided in her mother that she thought she'd made a breakthrough in physics that would have won her the Nobel Peace Prize, and she was afraid for anyone to find out because she knew they would kill her. This regime has a history of killing people who do great things in this country. They've killed Olympic athletes, they've killed their doctors, they've killed their educated. Out of hate to keep people in line. The story of Ava broke my heart. 1 year old. Or just in first grade, she was in first grade. Her father was addicted to drugs, was high when he beheaded his own daughter, when he ruthlessly cut off her neck. Her parents were divorced. Her mother had the ability to care for her, but because of the patriarchal, misogynistic laws that the regime has in place, they put her with her father instead, even though he was an addict, even though he wasn't safe. And he murdered his child. Regime has even used lethal injections on people, a lot of women. Doesn't matter if they're how old they are, if they're formally educated or not, or what they've done, but they are. Here's examples of 3 different women. Some of them just. Felda was only 19, she was a child. And these women were beaten, tortured, forced to make false confessions, or they were punished for taking care of detained protesters. But all of them died from extreme brutality from the regime, some of which involved lethal injections. Some died in their beds. Some died 2 months after they were let out. But they were all murdered.
Thank you, Liliana, for that. So with that, this brings our program to an end today. I want to thank again our panelists for their courage and for sharing their perspectives and bringing this dark topic, bringing some hope and light to it. We all have our steps to take and how we move forward from here together. Thank you to all of you, the audience, for being here today and being part of this event with us. Please, again, follow us on social media. I shared the link in the chat earlier. I will share it again. And please stay up to date on what we're doing. Stay up to date on these stories. This is all of our responsibility. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Zara, for your excellent moderating